Mother's Day. Some of you have been here before when I do Mother's Day sermons, and you've all heard that I try and avoid it because I always seem to insult somebody or make somebody feel bad. So tonight I'm going to make everybody feel bad and just be over with it. Okay? Now here's the thing, that we have mothers, and there are older mothers. My mother has gone on to be with God, and part of why Mother's Day is so hard is I was not a good son. She was a much better mother than I was a son. But we have older mothers, and then we have younger mothers, and then we have soon-to-be mothers in our church. We have an abundance of babies in the church. It's just great. You guys are doing a good job. Somebody's doing a good job. And then we have stern mothers, and we have feisty mothers. And then we have the let's just go shopping and forget it all mothers. That was one of my favorites. And we have beautiful mothers, and we have not so beautiful mothers. Not in this congregation, of course. And then, whoops, sorry. in case you missed it, that's one of my favorites. But and there are women who work away from home. There are women who work at home. There is no such thing as a mother who doesn't work, at least not one that I've ever met. And remember, this is Mother's Day, not Women's Day, Sister's Day, Aunt's Day, although if you want to celebrate those are fine. But you're going to see this sermon isn't even about mothers, it's about us who have mothers. And most of you either have one or had one. We have happy mothers, and we have not so happy mothers. And then we have mothers who want not to see what's going on. You've met those that just sort of ignore it. And then we have those that they already know. My mother was like that. I didn't have to explain things to her. She just knew. She was in her 50s when I was went into teenage years. And she had just about seen and heard it all. And I thought I could fool her and put things over on her. And she, in a very gentle way, always brought me back into line. And then we have the mothers who, it seems like no matter what we do, it breaks their hearts and it makes them very, very sad. And then what everybody wants is the fairy godmother, which none of us have. But anyway, that was my feeble attempt at humor. Ogden Mash. These are some of my favorite quotes. As I was working this week, I came back from chop bums, and I always come back from chop bums tired but filled with joy and sunburned, and I'm still trying to get the sand out of places that sand shouldn't be. But in working on this, I was having some fun with this, and I found some quotes that I'd heard before. But children are happy with nothing to ignore. That's where what parents were created for. My version was you have to have something to rebel against. That's why you should raise them in the church. A guy wrote this: no matter how old a mother is, she watches her middle-aged children for signs of improvement. I am going to be sorry I said this, but my wife is recovering from a knee replacement, and I read this to her, and she didn't think it was funny. I thought it was hilarious. All of her kids think it's hilarious because they're still trying to improve for her. And we have it on the camera. Well, I'll have to hide that. Oh. And then Henry Ward Beecher, who pastored a very large church back east a century and a half ago, wrote this: what the mother sings to the cradle goes all the way down to the coffin. And I believe that. It doesn't exempt fathers. I just think that especially little people have a connection with their mother. And I have known children that were ignored by their mother, and they paid a price for it their entire life. So this is what the scripture says. Now, this is where it gets, my pictures, that was sort of fun. This gets deadly serious. And if you don't realize how deadly it is, hang around. I'm going to show you. So says the God of the universe, honor your father and your mother as the Lord your God has commanded you, so that you may live long and that it may go well with you in the land the Lord your God has given you. Paul picks up the thing and he says, children, obey your parents in the Lord, for this is right. Honor your father and mother, which is the first commandment with a promise. Now, the idea that this is not one of the 10 suggestions, that this is an instruction from the heart of God, I don't think, at least the 20th and 21st century churches take it serious enough. For many of us, this is an I'll do what I can. Now, I have to acknowledge, not everybody had a mother like I had, and I'm sorry you didn't. I'm sorry she had me for a son, actually, but I know that some of you have struggled with your mothers and didn't have good relationships, and it's hard. I know that, and God knows that. But it's not a conditional instruction. It doesn't say, if your mother is such, honor her. If your mother does such, honor her. It's a pretty straightforward. Now, when I was in seminary, they said to me, when you see a direct statement, take it serious. And when there's a command, take it as if it was given to you. Especially if it's picked up in the New Testament from an Old Testament instruction. So this thing of Mother's Day, while I know it was an act of Congress and Hallmark, I think, paid for it. I'm not sure. Or Zale's jewelry or Jared's jewelry. Somebody's paying for this. But nonetheless, it is sort of a Hallmark day, but nonetheless, it should be a reminder that this is what God said. This didn't come from Hallmark. It came from God. Honor your mother so that you might live long and enjoy the land that you're in. To us, it's I'll do all I can. To God, it's a life and death issue. And I need to make that clear to you. He wasn't kidding around with this. This is life and death. He said so. Watch this. If anyone curses his father or mother, he must be put to death. He has cursed his father or his mother, and his blood will be on his own head. Again, it doesn't say, if your mother was as sweet as my mother was, then it says, if you curse your mother or father, if you show disrespect for them, if you disrespect them. Now, again, I have to say, I have known mothers in my life that were not very respectable. I understand that. I've even known mothers in my life that I thought were evil. But it's not a conditional instruction. So tomorrow on Mother's Day, it's not a suggestion from God that you show honor. It's not a suggestion that Monday or Tuesday. It's a command. This is from the heart of God. This is the same guy that said, have no other gods before me, who said, you need to have loving relationships with everybody. And then he says to honor your father and mother. Solomon picked up, listen, my son, to your father's instruction, and do not forsake your mother's teaching. They will be a garland to grace your head and a chain to adorn your neck. Now again, one of the reasons that Mother's Day is hard for me, my mother lived to be 102, and she used to call me on the phone sometimes, my phone in my mouth. This was before caller ID, so I could put it off. But she'd call me and I'd say, hi, and she'd say, Ross, yes. She says, you owe me. She said, you haven't called for a while, you owe me. I said, yes, Mom, I do. I'm sorry. And I had 1,000 excuses. I would love to go back. and be able to call her on the phone. Now, see, one of my great joys is that she was the one who brought me to Jesus. So at the marriage supper of the Lamb, I'm going to be there with her, and I'm going to enjoy that. Once again, we shall talk about old times and days. But it's serious business, and the things that she taught me. When I went to Bible school, I discovered that everything I needed to know, really, she'd already taught me. And I think a lot of you have had that kind of experience. Now, what I'm doing tonight is trying to honor her. I wished I had done as well honoring her when she was. Now, she used to listen to my sermons, and she'd correct my illustrations sometimes. And she would always say, "Your father didn't really feel that way about you." I'd say, "Well, it looked that way to me." But now, I have to say, especially on Mother's Day, that the Bible does not instruct that we are to honor all mothers. There's no Mother's Day in the Bible. It's just you're supposed to honor your mother. And so tonight when you go to bed, I hope that you got the message that God says, honor your mother. Whether she was all that you wanted her to be, even whether she was all that God wanted her to be, she still, according to God, is deserving of honor. I'm going to show you a little bit about that. But it is given that we honor our mother. And to those of you who have the privilege of still having a mom who's alive, again, whether you have a great relationship with her or not, I know that there are difficult ones. But here's what the Bible teaches. Now, I can't give you chapter and verse. This is just having immersed myself in biblical relationships most of my life and hearing what he said about loving your enemies and loving those who are mean to you, loving those who betray you. It comes down to this. To honor our mother means to sacrificially give them time. You know, my mom sat for years in Houston at my niece's place. We offered her to come up here, but she couldn't handle the weather up here. And so many times I know she was thinking of me because I could sort of feel her prayers. Time. How much time would it have taken me if I'd have called her 3 times a week and talked for 10 minutes? It's painful. It wouldn't cost that much. Gosh, I spent that much ordering pizza. Not really, but close. So to honor, and I have to say this, to honor your mother does not necessarily mean you have to have a deep affection. This is not an issue of the heart. This is an issue of the hands. Now, I think there is an issue of the heart because we're told to love everybody. But this particular instruction to honor isn't honor her if you feel like it, or honor her if your heart is in it, or honor her if anything. It says to honor her. This is largely a do whether you feel like it or not. So take this with you, that this is a do whether you like it or not. First is to sacrificially give time, and then effort. How does somebody know whether you care about them? Well, saying so is wonderful. I'm older now, and every time I end up hanging up a conversation with one of my family, I always say I love you because I know sure enough that I don't know what tomorrow brings. And I have stood on this pulpit and done memorial services for people who thought they had another day or they thought they had another week. So whenever I hang up the phone, I say to my family and my family members, I love you. And they have learned. Even my little 4-year-old granddaughter, only she doesn't wait for me sometimes. She gets ready to go and she says, bye, Papa, I love you. Honoring. But just the words alone can be hollow. There needs to be something behind it. And I use the word sacrificially because the 13th chapter of 1 Corinthians, when it talks about love, it's all about sacrifice. It's all about giving what you don't necessarily want to give or even what the person deserves. It's what you are commanded to do. We are commanded to love not only our friends, but our enemies. And if we're commanded to love our enemies sacrificially, what about those who gave us life? Resources, it sort of goes with it. But I was thinking in terms of excusing the Jared commercial that I was watching on television the other night, where and my wife and I were sitting there watching, and this guy was giving a wife a present, and he'd come from this special store. It cost $17,000, and my wife says, "I guess you don't love me that much, huh?" Fortunately, it was a joke, but there is something to giving resources, more than just words, more than just a pat on the back. There is something to this that must be considered, especially in this day and age. And I watch a lot of our older people are being sort of put into institutions and the families. I know sometimes they can't take care of them, but I watch and I go and visit, and they're alone. And they have family, but they're alone. And I think that's not what God intended. And once in a while, what was kind of fun over at Trout Bums, we had, I think we counted at least 10 3-generation groups, and we had one 4-generation group. That's cool. When I was a small child, it was fairly normal for a home to have a grandma and a grandpa, or a grandma or a grandpa in the home. It's far less common now, and I think maybe with the economy that's going to change, and it's a good thing. And then the last one, well, actually it's the second to last, I'm sorry, is dignity. And as I was praying about this and thinking about this and thinking about getting older and what about getting older makes me nervous. And one of them is the loss of independence. The other is a loss of dignity. And I think how often we abdicate that part of treating our older relatives, especially our mothers. Now, when Father's Day comes, I'm going to do exactly the same service with pictures of men. No, I'm not. But we abdicate the sense of making sure that our older relatives still maintain dignity. Now, again, you say, well, my mother was or my mother wasn't. It doesn't matter. It's not conditional. We are to give them from our hearts the very best that we have, because it's a service to God. It isn't a matter of, well, they deserve it. Some, like my mother, did. Many of you have mothers that did deserve it. Some of you had mothers who didn't deserve it. It's not conditional. Now, that's the 9th time I've said that. Somewhere between 9 and 12, it'll sink in. This is not conditional. There's 10. It is not. This is not one of God's wishes for your life. It's an instruction to honor her. To honor her with your time, your efforts, with your resources, and to offer her dignity. And this is the one, I don't know, on Mother's Day I've had lots of people tell me about their struggle with their parent. And sometimes my heart breaks because it's difficult. And so my standard line comes out, but give them the credit for what they were trying to do or what they wanted to do. We're all so deeply flawed. I use my grandchildren, the 2 littlest ones, so often now because I'm a grandfather again. But the fact is that they think I'm somebody, the little ones think I'm somebody that I'm not. And I would like to be that man. I would give any price. But they're little and they think I can walk on water and I can solve any problem for them. And the worst of mothers that I ever met meant to do better, wanted to do better. The worst I ever met. And I've met some crazy mothers in my life. I mean, literally crazy. But they all wanted to be something more. And I think part of our responsibility, and this is just, I don't know that I have God's mind on this, but I think so, that part of our praise to God is for them and what they would have liked to have done or what they meant to do and just were flawed. I am so deeply flawed. And the only way I'm going to get out of it is to step into God's presence when he heals me of all my flaws, when he sort of fills in all the low spots. And I wonder how many mothers had bad relationships with their children because of their flaws. They meant to do better. Does that sound bad? And I think we should honor the fact that they meant, even the worst of them meant to do better than they did. And so for that, we ought to be giving praise to God for what they attempted to do. And some of us were really bad kids. I know. And I love you for it, Hank. Even if you're 80 years old. I didn't think you looked a day over 75. Okay. Some of us had mothers we didn't deserve, and some of our resentments, perhaps, and some of the things that we think they did wrong really weren't their faults. They were really our fault. And we probably won't know it till we stand before God, and God says, remember this situation? You see, because when I was a child, I spoke like a child. I thought like a child. I reasoned like a child. But you're not children. And when it says to honor your parents, it's not talking to children, it's talking to progeny, I'll get it right. Progeny. It's not, these words are not given to children, these are given to adults who have mothers. So I said this already, and I'm quoting somebody. It's not so much an affection of heart as an action of hand, although I think the affection of heart is what God desires from us. And I've heard this, and as a matter of fact, I saw something on television not long ago, and it was speaking to men, and it says, any fool can produce a child that takes a man to be a father. Now, I've never heard it feminized, but I know it's true. Bearing a child does not really make one a mother. It's the love and all that goes with it. It's all that goes with it. And for that, we need to be grateful to God. We need to articulate our gratefulness to him. This is my most unfavorite quote to end. Children begin by loving their parents. After a time, they judge them. Rarely, if ever, do they forgive them. Now, if you've ever read Oscar Wilde, you know he was a very fractured and flawed man because of his childhood. So tonight, here's the last word. You are to forgive your parents, especially your mother tonight, for wounds that were inflicted. And everybody has them. And every one of you who's a mother have inflicted wounds. You have. We'll get to fathers in a few weeks. So pray with me. Father, I want to offer you words of praise for my mother, for the work that she put in, and the work that as a child perhaps I didn't recognize. She was certainly flawed too, although I never saw the flaws. But there are brothers and sisters in this room tonight that need to forgive their mother for wounds inflicted, for types of abuse that were given. But we're commanded to forgive anyone who offends us. So tonight on this Mother's Day weekend, I pray all of us leave with a new gratitude. It's not based on conditions, not based on what they did or didn't do, but based on the fact that they are our mothers and that we're commanded, we're instructed, we're ordered to honor them. So I lift up tonight all of the mothers in the room. Thank you for them. And I pray that each of us will be more faithful in showing honor to those who you've instructed us to show the greatest honor. In Jesus' name.